Hey, what's going on, everybody? So we're going to be working on the El Camino. We just finished up working on the 280ZX with a bunch of the seals, so that's outside right now. And so we've got this guy in here, and so we need to work on the master cylinder and the brake booster. We're going to replace both of those. And then I also had a little boo-boo the last time I tried bleeding the brakes on this thing. So on the calipers, I actually broke both of the bleeder screws. So where you basically unloosen the bleeder screw, those cracked off. Unfortunately, we tried to fix them and just couldn't. So we ended up getting some new calipers. So Ashley went ahead and removed this side over here. So we've got the caliper off. We went over to the parts store and we went ahead and bought some new calipers. They were about 25 bucks each with the core. So we're gonna replace these first. We'll get those in, and then we'll move on to the master cylinder and the brake booster. Here's the master cylinder. Here's the brake booster, and as you can see, they're pretty old, pretty shoddy looking, so we're gonna go ahead and replace both those as well. So I've got a new brake booster, and then I also have a master cylinder. So we're gonna have to bench bleed this guy. So I also got some other parts. And Ashley's got some parts over here. All right, so I picked this up as well, master cylinder bleeder kit. So we're gonna use this, and we're gonna hook these up to the master cylinder over here. And then we're gonna get all the air out of this. And then so once we got that all good, we're gonna install this and that into here. Seems good enough. Would you like a drink? Just joking.
Don't drink old brake fluid.
All right, so I think we're all done. So what we'll then move on to is the harder part. Well, hopefully it won't be too bad.
Excuse me?
Well, on the 280ZX, it was pretty hard to take the brake booster out because there was very little space in the 280ZX. I was like kind of upside down in there trying to get the bolts out. On the El Camino, hopefully it'll be a little bit more room, but basically there's going to be 4 bolts to the brake booster on the inside underneath the steering wheel. So I have to get in there, disconnect the brake pedal, take those 4 bolts out, and then we should be able to get the master cylinder brake booster out and put the new one in. But before we do that, here, let me show you something. The way this master cylinder is, it's somewhat crooked, so it kind of shoots up. So the problem with that is if you try to, bleed this while it's on the car, you may end up with air kind of trapped up here. So what we're gonna have to do is figure out like how to keep the master cylinder level in order to bleed it or have all the air come out of it prior to us putting it on here, because it will be kind of at an angle. Let me actually show you from a different picture. You can actually see kind of here. It's like kind of at an angle, it shoots up. And you can see kind of the reservoir here kind of sits this way, and then it kind of sits at an angle. So what we want to do is bleed it when it's like this, not like this. So we'll have to figure that out too.
Can you put the wheel back on?
Yeah, we could put the wheel back on if the space wasn't so tight. Too many project cars.
For real. Are you filming me trying to put this tire on by myself? Is that what's happening? It feels like that's what's happening.
No.
I've never put a tire on by myself. And how my dad told me to do it ain't the right way. I'm just putting it out there on YouTube. My dad does not know how to change a tire correctly.
What?
Sorry, Dad. You taught me all wrong.
There's only one way to put the tire on.
Well, he told me the wrong way to take it off and the wrong way to put it back on. There we go.
My foot! Ah! Just joking.
No, that was me, my foot.
Look at that! Woo! Don't hit yourself in the face.
That would happen.
All right, so after a long period of time with pain and suffering trying to get the bolts out of this guy. So here, but I think we're ready to take things out. So I already went ahead and loosened these here. We actually put a little bit of heat on them like we did earlier with the what the heck, I can't even
Bolts
think.
for the caliper.
The caliper. Thank you, Ashley. So we used the heat to remove some bolts on the caliper. I'll let Ashley go ahead and loosen this, and then we'll pull this out and get it out of the way. What's next, Ashley?
Install the new ones.
All right, so we're ready to bleed the master cylinder. Now again, we had to take it, we're gonna have to bleed it off the car just because, like I said earlier, it's at an angle. So we ended up setting this little rig up because we do not have a vise or a bench for that matter. So let me show you what we did. Okay, so this is actually something that we built previously. I'll put a link in the video description. So what we did is we basically took a longer 2x4 here, and we ended up using a clamp. So the clamp is here, just holding down the master cylinder. As you can see, the master cylinder is pretty level. And then we went ahead and hooked up this little kit that we bought. It actually came with some black tubing. It came with some black tubing, but what we did is we changed it to some of this see-through tubing that I had for one of my other kits, one of the other kits that I had to bleed brakes, so we can actually see the air bubbles coming out of here. So what's going to happen is we are going to press this in, and we're going to fill this up. Well, we'll fill this up first, press that in and out, and what will happen is we should see the air come out of here as we start to press this in and out. We'll fill it up. That will get all the air out of it. We'll then put the lid back on, and then once the lid is on, that will help keep suction here, and all the fluid won't be pouring out of this. And then we'll transition this over to the new brake booster. So we just finished bleeding the master cylinder and installing it onto the vehicle. We've got all the lines hooked up appropriately. We went and did a brake bleed and had all kinds of issues where it just seemed like the brakes weren't bleeding right, and I started with the furthest rear, and it just kept on having, air bubbles. It just seemed like there wasn't flow properly moving. So I did a little bit of research online, and I found that there's something called a proportioning valve. So that's basically this guy here. So what the proportion valve does is it actually feeds the brake lines from the master cylinder into the proportion valve, and then it kind of sends all the other brake lines to the front brake lines, and then to the rear brake lines going to the front calipers, and then to the drums at the back. So I'm pretty sure that this is seized up. So let me show you just how this works in general, and why I ended up buying a new one. Okay, so I ended up having to buy a new one because the old one just seemed to be locked up. So apparently the way this works is, the lines come in from the master cylinder, and then this gets mounted underneath the car, and then you have your brake line that goes to the back to the drums, and then you have some more brake lines that are going to the front disc. And then this here is actually a sensor to activate the brake light in the dash of the car. And so basically the way this works is if you end up having a leak, say in the back of your car, the proportion valve will move a little piston in here and basically stop the brake fluid from leaking in the back. So basically it's kind of like a safety, if you will. And so what will happen is as that valve moves, this will make contact here and you will see the brake light come on. So show you what that looks like. So there you go. All right, so apparently in order to brake bleed with something that has this proportion valve in it, you actually need to make sure as you're bleeding the brakes that proportion valve doesn't move back and forth. So I actually bought this here, and I'll put all the parts or the part description and the link below in this video. But this is a tool that you basically would unscrew here. You put that in there, and that stops that valve from moving back and forth as you're bleeding the brakes, because as you're bleeding the brakes, that's going to simulate a loss of brake fluid going to either the front or back. So I was thinking I would only have to purchase this for the one that I have currently right now, but apparently mine seems to be all locked up. So there's another button here that you can actually force the valve to move back and forth. Mine just seems to be completely locked up. I can't even remove this portion is completely locked up into there, even though it's plastic for some reason. And it's very tight. It's really hard for me to get any tools in there. I can't even get this off. So I think we pretty much have a bad one. It looks like it's rusted out pretty bad. So I'm going to go ahead and uninstall it and install this one. And we're going to make sure that we have this installed like so that valve doesn't move back and forth. And then if I need to redo any of the brake lines, I have done some brake line flaring previously, so I'll put a link up in the description for you to check that video out when we had to do some work on the Datsun 280ZX. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and bend all these brake lines that I made to go from the master cylinder down to the proportion valve. I got this special tool here, which is going to allow me to twist these brake lines that I've made to pretty much kind of go down there to where the proportion valve is. So once I get all of these kind of set up, what I'll do is then go underneath, get this thing put in, and then hopefully we'll be good to go. Alright, so now we're finally going to be able to test drive the El Camino, check out the brakes, see how they work. So I'm going to get this thing started and we'll see how well the brakes work. Okay, so hopefully you can hear me alright. The El Camino is known for being a little bit loud. But the brake light is still on. I forgot to hook up the brake sensor back up, and so that's why that light is on. So I'll have to go back and connect that sensor. It shouldn't affect any of our braking. So we'll go ahead and give it a test drive. I'll hook that sensor back up, and then we should be good to go. All right, so fingers crossed. Let's see how the brakes work. I'm gonna go ahead and back this thing up, and let's test out the brakes. Okay, so far the pedal feels pretty good. We'll see how it feels when I get on the road here. We're not going to go too far, just kind of here around in the subdivision, just to get a feel for how the brakes feel as far as the pedal feels. Well, it's definitely stopping much harder than it was before. Before I'd hit the pedal and basically I wouldn't get a whole lot of anything.